Hello, I'm doing a book review, and the book I want to review is Batman, The Court of Owls. Now, The Court of Owls is a Batman story arc written by Scott Snyder, and this is the first of Scott Snyder's run on the New 52. Now, Scott Snyder has written other Batman stories prior to the New 52. Like, before this, he wrote an excellent Batman story arc called The Black Mirror, but that was before the New 52. Now, the best way I can describe what the New 52 is, at a certain point DC decided to reboot the continuity of their universe and essentially create a new timeline for their comic book series to take place in. However, some of the stories from the old DC universe are still in continuity. Especially with Batman, because I know with Scott Snyder's run on Batman, some of the old Batman stories are still canon, like The Killing Joke, for example, because in Scott Snyder's story arc Death of the Family, there are references to The Killing Joke, and there are also references to Death in the Family in that one. Like, I'm told the New 52 is more of a soft reboot than anything else. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I'm not really a follower of the mainstream DC continuity. Like, whenever I read a Batman story or a Superman story, I just read that as a standalone story, and I don't really worry about what continuity it's set in. Now, normally I do take continuity very seriously, especially for, like, TV shows and movies, but for some reason with comic books, I really don't, and maybe that's because characters like Superman and Batman have such a long history that it really is a suspension of disbelief to believe that they're all in the same continuity. So honestly, when I read like a Batman story arc or graphic novel or a Superman graphic novel, once again, I read that as a standalone story. But once again, The Court of Owls was the first of Scott Snyder's run on the New 52, and this was followed up with a direct sequel titled The City of Owls. Now, the plot of The Court of Owls is in the story this John Doe ends up getting murdered, and Batman starts investigating into this murder, and he discovers that this man's death is somehow linked with this legend of an underground society known as the Court of Owls, who supposedly control everything that's going on in Gotham City. Now, Batman believes that this is just a myth, because the way he sees it, nobody knows the city better than him, and he's found no evidence to suggest the existence of such an underground society. Now, according to the legend, the Court of Owls have this assassin known as the Talon working for them, and they use him to sort of take out their enemies. And what happens is, in the story, Bruce Wayne actually becomes a target for the Talon. And as the story goes on, Batman/Bruce Wayne discovers to his horror that this legend is in fact true. And that's the basic plotline of The Court of Owls. Now, I thought The Court of Owls was a really good Batman story, and I definitely recommend this if you're a Batman fan. And I think Scott Snyder is a great writer in general, but I really do think he's a great writer for Batman, because he does a great job at really diving into Batman's psyche and really exploring who Bruce Wayne is as a character. And one thing I really love about Scott Snyder's Batman stories, especially this one, is there are actually a lot of horror elements in his stories. And in this one, now this is kind of a spoiler here, but eventually Batman does get kidnapped by the Court of Owls, and they try to drive him insane, and they push him right to the edge of sanity, and it's actually really horrifying, and for a certain point this story becomes a pure psychological horror story. And it starts to get really surreal, because there are certain moments in this comic where it's clearly set in Bruce Wayne's mind, and you start to realize that Bruce Wayne/Batman is a very psychologically scarred man. Now, Greg Capullo, I have no idea if I actually said his name right. He does the artwork in this book, and I would say he does do a pretty good job. I'll admit, some of it's a little over-exaggerated for my taste, especially in this page here, where this is a scene that takes place at Arkham Asylum. Some of it's a little, like, over-exaggerated for my taste, but then there are moments where the artwork is actually really good and actually really freaking creepy, especially towards the end where you get all the surreal stuff. Now, this book does end on a huge cliffhanger, which I believe does get picked up in City of Owls. I'll admit I have not read City of Owls yet, but I will be reading that, and I'll review that for next year because I do these Batman reviews every January, so next January when I do these Batman reviews again, that's when I'll review City of Owls. Now, elements from both this comic and City of Owls were adapted into the 2015 animated film Batman vs. Robin. But yeah, once again, I recommend Scott Snyder's Court of Owls if you haven't read it yet, and bye.